Shadowing supermarket profits and your grocery bills. Hi, I'm Sam Hawley, coming to you from Gabigoland. This is ABC News Daily. In the last few days, we found out Coles and Woolworths have returned but the profit of 1.1 and $1.62 billion respectively from the full financial year. So, as shoppers, are we getting a fair deal during a cost of living crisis? Today, Prashant Kararatne from Quality Business School and who's watching over the big plays and why it might be worth avoid them altogether. Prashant, at the moment, I think every Australian is really noticing a big surge in the cost of everything when we do our weekly shop. It's pretty stark, isn't it? Yes, your grocery bill, your petrol, your rent, cost of living is increasing in all aspects of life. I've just bought $19 worth of stuff and it's fit in one basket. More expensive, everything's more expensive. We used to buy a kidney, a banana, and now I charge you 83 cents for one banana. Cole says in the last quarter of the financial year, they were seeing inflation moderate a bit and some products are actually reducing in cost. That's things like cucumbers, broccoli, capsicum. So there's a bit of good news, but still things are really expensive. The cost of many essential foods has risen sharply again over the past year. New data shows some items are 40% more expensive. It comes as the two big supermarket. Let's look now at Coles and Woolworths and profit that they're making. But not everyone feeling the pinch today. Coles posts a profit of more than $1 billion. The new Ursa Foods sell but like supermarket chain has posted an annual net profit of $1.6 billion, which is up 4.6% previous year. None of us per se expected them to make a loss, of course, but given time are pretty tough right now. How are they making such big profit? So this is tricky one because Coles and Woolworths predominantly sell in grocery and pre-pandemic before cost of living began to increase like this. We could typically have substitutes. We could eat out. We go to restaurant, you can take away, and now the cost of living is increasing. You'd make a substitution effect and think, well, that's actually not quite expensive for me to eat out and go to restaurant. So the next best alternative is to buy my own food and prepare it myself. So you'd expect a shift toward the grocery store. So that would be one element of the profit margin on the profit in absolute term increase because consumers, because of the cost of living crisis, are actually swapping to buy more groceries compared to before, at least in relative terms. So the cost of living crisis is actually helping the supermarket because they are selling your basic need. Yes. Of course, Coles and Woolly, they think this profit is actually pretty moderate on the finance now, and Coles share slumped today after its annual result disappointed investors. And yes, to them the share price did go down for cause not expecting a high profit margin. Coles and Woolworths have both underperformed market since COVID, and today Coles dropped to 3-year low. It was down more than 7%. Woolworths fell 3% in sympathy. So we will share they did rebound after its profit was revealed. And for sure, there is an argument that having a good profitable supermarket sector is a good thing. Well, we have a free market economy in Australia, so if companies are navigating challenges such as the pandemic and making profit, it is a sign that the economy is performing well and consumers do have the opportunity to shop around. Coles and Woodles are a significant duopoly. They control roughly two-thirds of the market, but consumers do have choices with your Aldi, your Costco, with your local grocery stores and IGA. So there are options for consumers for them to shop around and look for cheaper alternatives. The Cozy worker thinks households are being really savvy in the way they shopping and they're looking out for the best deal. Really interesting, the supermarket have noticed they taking a big hit at the moment because of organized retail crime and the theft that apparently is across the world because of the cost of living crisis. As we said in the rate, we've seen an increase in about 20% years on year, and that is driven by the organized crime. So we're certainly seeing a lot more reports coming through from the story that is that from customers as well. Okay, but this still duopoly. Yes, this is definitely unique to Australia and New Zealand when you compare to other comparable Western market, UK, the rest of Europe, USA, Canada, where Australia and New Zealand have very concentrated market structures in the grocery space with roughly two-thirds in both Australia and New Zealand, where two main places control such a large market share. So there is less competition compared to comparable Western counterpart, and that does tend to drive up prices because of the less competition. Person, I want to touch on how Coles and Woolworths and proper day making compared to the situation overseas. What does that look like? It's an interesting comparison to make. Yes, you compare on the global stage where Coles and Woolworths are making these profit margins are much higher compared to comparable grocery store, let's say in the UK, for example, causes EBIT margin or operating margin is about 5.3% and Woolworths is 5.9%. But then if you compare Tesco and Tesco in the UK, it's around the 3 to 3.8% mark. So their margins are much higher than their counterparts in more competitive market. What does this mean? Does it mean that Australian supermarket are putting their prices up well above inflation to make a bigger profit than perhaps the Sainsbury in the UK? I think you actually look at the rate of inflation versus cost and rules price increases. It's not that much of difference, right? Compared to now Australian players compared to overseas players. If you look at the Dodge report, which is the global part of retailing, and you look at the top 40 firm, Woolworths is number 24 and Coles is number 39, and you look at all the companies listed there, they based in the US, Germany, China, UK, France, Spain, all which have significantly large population, so it would make sense. Woolworths and Coles being the top 40 is quite a start. So that does hint at the fact there is less competition, helping them drive up prices and drive up their profit margin significantly higher than their comparable counterparts overseas. Right, when there's only two in the market, there's a game theory happening here where they both realize if I reduce my price so with the other, and so they don't start a price war, whereas there is more likely in overseas market where there is more competitor. And yes, really does seem like you have two of everything in Australia. The Australian Council Trade Union, Josie Mitchell, says it's legitimate to ask where the two big supermarkets are using Joseph Mitchell said it's legitimate to ask whether the two big supermarkets are using inflation as a smokescreen to push up prices. We see a lot more concentration in Australian supermarket sector than we do overseas. Coles and Woolworths control nearly two-thirds of the supermarket sector compared to the UK or US, which has much lower level of concentration. It is a less mathematic question. The Triple C should be looking at asking the store the two main places to start releasing their contract deal and their costing so they can see the gap between wholesale and retail prices and make sure that the other place can enter the market and compete with the two main plays. So I don't think we have that data released to the regulator in West Australia. That's sort of the problem. You can say this power the supermarket have over their supply chains, over the customer, and over the workers, which means that they are able to extract a higher rate of profit. In New Zealand, they've established a five-character specific grocery commission to look at this issue. Is so not increasing the power of the commission but establishing a standalone one for grocery. And given the oligopoly nature, given the fact that this has happened historically, not just with the cost of the living crisis but other cycles as well, we do need monitoring mechanism to monitor what Coles and Woolworths are doing with their wholesale contract and making sure that others have equitable access to their chain so that more players can enter the market. The governments can look at longer term mechanism of incentive to encourage other players to enter our market and start creating some more competition. It will be good for the government to start investing and thinking about this so that the cycle doesn't keep repeating per for economic crisis. Yeah, exactly. I can see all that parliamentary members and unions are running inquiry designed to scrutinize the sector pricing decision and make this cost of living crisis, so that's underway as well. And for what it's worth, the Udo CEO Brett Banges, he thinks we start noticing lower prices by the end of the year. We remain optimistic whether it's before Christmas or just after Christmas that we'll start seeing some improved underlying value, but cost of product is going down and prices will start to moderate. We're trying to balance I guess as consumer, what we really want to know is, are the supermarket doing the right things by us? What do you think? Are they? This is a very tricky question. You can have equity of outcome and fairness and equity of opportunity. You can all agree the outcome doesn't seem to be fair because if you are learning lower income earner, you're going to suffer from a great extent than middle and high income earner. Having said that, Coles and rubles are not monopolizing milk and bread. There are other options for us to go to. My wife also like to take us to, let's say, the local Iranian store or local Indian store, and prices in some of these stores haven't increased as much, if not at all. Fairness opportunity still exists in Australia for us to go to other outlets. So I would rather think of a slightly more balanced view and comparing fairness of outcome and fairness of opportunity. As a teacher of economic and business analyst at Macquarie University, this episode was produced by Bernice at Sam Don and Anna John, who also did the mix. Our supervising producer is David Collin. I'm Sam Holly. ABC News Daily will be back again tomorrow. To get in touch with him, please email us on abcnewsdaily@abcnet.au. Thanks for listening.